It's Tim Albright with AVNation with an AVNation special, talking to an old friend, Gordon Dutch, about PR, marketing, and AV consultant. Gordon Dutch from Resource. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for having me.
So I met you, good Lord, 10 years ago, maybe, at ISC through a mutual friend, Nick Belcour from Peerless AV. And you have done a number of things in the industry. And about 4 years ago, you're saying 2020, you guys launched Resource. And before we get into some of the new things that you guys are doing and kind of the need for both global and local marketing and PR for manufacturers, talk for a second about what you guys have done over these last 4 years.
Yeah, so obviously, as you said, Nick and I worked together at Peerless. I was one of the owners of Peerless. So 2008-9, they acquired my company and I joined the board there. And we were a UK only business. So we really had to expand our business. Peerless were mainly US. And through that project, it really delivered a huge amount of contacts across Europe and the rest of the world. So fast forward to 2019, I stepped back from the Peerless board, planning a retirement. I found out I was very bad at golf and that my wife encouraged me heavily to get another job. The success of our 34-year marriage was the fact that I was never here. So I therefore hooked up with a couple of guys I used to work with. One of them was a guy called Lee Baker, who was the operations director, commercial director for Midwich Group.
Okay.
And the other one was Ian Sempers, who was the owner of Medium, which he'd sold to Exertis. Yeah. So the three of us had all worked together for over sort of 20 years. We'd all run, built, sold, float, merged all sorts of different businesses. And we felt that, with what happened with COVID, that there was probably a need for a business and sales consultancy to help people go through the transitions that were starting to happen. There was obviously lots of issues in the supply chain. And on top of that, getting staff into the office, hybrid meetings, there was a lot of stuff going on. So really, we started off mainly as a sales and business consultancy. And then over time, more and more people asked us, hey, do you build websites? Can you do this? Can you do that? And we realized within about 6 months that we'd probably given more business to website developers and PR companies than we'd written ourselves. So like any good strategist, we stepped back and went, you know what, why don't we go into web design, press, PR, and use all our contacts? And so that's really what's happened. We do a lot of projects under NDA. People that are looking for alternative or new distribution. We mainly deal with American companies because that's been my background for 30 years. And obviously there's a lot of complexity in Europe, not least because of Brexit. And off the back of the consultancy work, we do a lot of now global websites and press and PR because we've opened offices in Germany, France, Spain, and then other areas of the world. So yes, as much as I can put 4 years into 2 minutes, hopefully that was it, Tim.
Well, you actually hit on something there that I want to get into, because that was the next step. Is you guys have added the marketing part, you've added the PR part. Talk about some of those complexities for an American company, either trying to enter the European market, or expand in the European market. Like quite frankly, I'm fond of a phrase, I don't know what I don't know. And just for the record, I don't know a lot. So what is it that they don't know that they don't know?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, obviously language is the obvious one. I think, America and England are two great nations separated by a common language. Obviously, you like to put Zs in recognize and other phrases. We've stuck with an S.
Well, hang on. No, you're confusing us with the Canadians. We don't say Z. We say Z like you're supposed to, but go ahead.
So I think that, but generally we find that the language between America and the UK is quite common.
Yeah.
But the real differences are when you get into other languages. And so Germany, which is generally the UK and Germany are kind of the 1 and 2 markets in Europe. The Germans obviously very nationalistic and like to have things in their own language. And also, technically, they want translations that are very accurate and within context. So that's quite important. Same with the French, again, very proud nation. If you want to be in France, you really need to, be in France with good translations and some feet on the ground. And then generally with Spanish, of course, this works really well in Latam, South America, Mexico. And what we found generally is that the, Mexicans will be quite happy with true Spanish, but perhaps Spanish aren't as fond of Mexican Spanish. So I think all of these colloquialisms are important in Europe. Then you have currencies. Obviously, the difference between US dollar, pound, euro, and other currencies. Culture, the markets are very, very different. Some of the markets are channel based. Some of them are really more direct and some are a mix. And how you do business in those areas obviously changes as well. So there's a huge amount of differences. And the final one, I suppose, is GDPR, which for any American companies who's ever tried to navigate a website or some sort of database, the words GDPR really strike fear because it's a different application in the UK to Germany and France and other countries. And that data management is quite key as well. So there's a lot of small but quite major things that, differentiate.
Well, it's a lot of balls to juggle, right? And so walk me through, let's say that I'm a medium tier manufacturer and I'm looking to get into Europe and to use your example, we're going to target the UK and we're going to target Germany. All right. What are some of the first steps that you're going to take me through?
So the first thing we like to do, examine the existing business, because clearly if you've won in the US in certain areas and certain verticals, it would make sense to look at those verticals and where you can apply a copy and paste. But where that might differ comes down to competition in region. So what you really need to look at is, what is the product line? And when you're looking at the coming into Europe, who are your competitors in the local area? What you tend to find is most of the American brands that are advanced have already moved into Europe in some way. So therefore, as a US brand, you're going to have brands that you're used to competing with, but then you're going to have a whole plethora of brands that you probably are unaware of that are local competition. So understanding, what are your USPs? How do those USPs translate into the local area and how best to come to market, whether that is through distribution, whether it's direct to system integrators or VARs, and what sort of support network you need. Because ultimately our business AV is grown out of relationships, it's grown out of support. It's not just having a great product. So all of those relationships that have probably been established in the US in terms of technical support, on-site support, installation, they're all the same things you need to consider to replicate in Europe.
So really quickly before we move on, because again, I don't know anything, what does the acronym USP stand for?
Unique selling points.
Thank you. And VAR, of course, is value.
Value-added reseller.
Thank you. You said something there that's very interesting to me because, and that's the support side of this.
Yes.
How do you develop that? Are we talking about physical, a physical office? Are we talking about employees in country? How do you develop that support system? Because, the internet's a wonderful thing, right? And you and I are talking through, the internet right now. The system you use is called Riverside. You and I can talk on anything. We can talk on Zoom. We talk on Teams, whatever. And that there's no area code anymore because you and I are both old enough to remember those. But to actually have support, and let's say that you have you need to go on site. How do you develop that system to support these new clients in their home country?
Yeah, so it depends on the scale. and
Okay.
obviously the approach they choose to take. So in terms of, the local support, there are many service providers here that can provide on-site support. So for example, if you were installing an LED wall, then generally the technicalities of that will be far more involved in terms of the process you have to go through,
Yeah.
understanding the consultants that are involved in that process, especially weight and, public safety if it's in a public area.
Yeah.
If you're simply installing a TV on the wall in a bar or, a transit area, then obviously it needs to be safe, but ultimately it's a more simplistic install. So it really depends on, what the case study is for that manufacturer. Certainly if you move into more complex installations, whether they be LED or whether they be complete room installations, in terms of a Teams room, it's really important to have boots on the ground that can service it, as well as have online support. And online support can be offered as long as it's in the same time frame, as you have. Obviously, there's between, a 6 to sort of 8 hour difference, sometimes 5 to 7. But ultimately, that is important to have people to be able to access the support they need, whether it's online or physically in the local territory.
Something you mentioned when you were talking about the various countries, obviously, the U.S. and Canada and the UK, a lot of folks share English as a language. How do you guys go about getting translators, let's say for German or for French or for Dutch, when AV is such a unique language itself, right? There are phrases that we use. So how do you guys go about getting folks? Are these AV professionals that also happen to be translators? How do you do that?
Yeah, so actually, that's a great question, Tim. And it's one of the reasons that we have been successful. So all of the people that I work with have been in the AV industry for 10 to 15 years. They're all generally ex-editors or ex-technical staff from manufacturers. So when it comes to translation, not only are they in territory and, original inhabitants of that territory, so they understand the language, but more importantly, they understand the context of the translation. And that's really key, because you can have a good literal translation, but when you drop that into our industry, it loses understanding in context because of the uniqueness of our industry. So we opened a translation hub in Dusseldorf in Germany. The lady that runs that is technically qualified as a translator in multiple languages. And then all of the PRs we use are in territory. So then they will proofread that translation and make sure it's absolutely perfect. It doesn't look good on a brand if they have Google Translate, or a poor translation. It looks like they don't care about that territory, to those people that, are based there.
One quick thing before I let you go is you and I have both been to ISE, countless times. And one of the things that you guys focus on is that global part of AV. How global is AV becoming from your perspective, and how important is it to have somebody like Resource or somebody else that has kind of a global view for a company either coming out of the U.S. and going into Europe, or a Asian company going into the U.S. How important is it for those companies to have somebody to kind of work alongside them as they venture into a new territory?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, it's absolutely critical. I think that, what we've seen, certainly even when I was running Peerless, is we started to see that, some of the global bids would be bid out in the US, in Germany, in the UK. So you'd have the same project coming from different territories while the end user was looking for any advantage they could get. So I think that, having global capabilities as a business development team was really important to us, and also having the ability to service clients globally. I think especially the larger blue chips, when they deploy new teams rooms or Zoom rooms or whatever it is they're going to deploy. They really want consistency within the product range, within the software, and within the service sector. So I think, global is absolutely critical, along with local knowledge, and that's really the mix of the two. Thinking globally, acting locally is really the jewel in the crown for me, I think, for most companies.
Gordon, last question here is, if you're consulting, again, my mid-tier manufacturing company, what's one piece of advice you would give somebody as they look beyond their own borders?
So generally, I would recommend them to take some advice from somebody like us and just do what we call a stage one project before they jump in with both feet. A stage one project for us is to look at the business, give them some feedback on the local, communities, how they go to market, rather than just jump in with both feet and start, doing stuff. There's a lot of companies who have lost a huge amount of money trying to get from Europe into America. And in the same way, American companies coming into Europe and not really understanding. Employment law, for example, differs massively between the UK and Germany and France, and those are things that can cost an awful lot of money. So I think, really educate yourself. What is it you want to do? What we ask our clients is, what's the 5-year plan? What does it look like? Where do you want to be in 5 years? And then we try and map backwards the stepping stones, the costs that are associated with that, and then give the options of how to get where they want to go and what it looks like, and we give obviously different options on that. So I think just, really educating yourself about the difference in the markets and bringing someone on that can help introduce you where required to the AV consultants, the distributors, the system integrators. That's, to be honest, that's probably where our most success has come from. The fact that we're connected to all of those people. And once we work with a brand, we can do those introductions for them.
All right, very good. Gordon Dutch from Resource, sir. Somebody wants to get a hold of you. How do they do that?
Well, you can go on our website. There's some case studies there. That's www.re-sauce.net. Or you can just email us hello, HELLO, at re-sauce.net.
All right, very good. Gordon Dutch from Resource. Thank you much, sir. For us, for AVNation, go by our website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv. Find more programs like this and a host of others. All that and more at avnation.tv. It's avnation.tv.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.